Hello, I'm Alan Kohler, Editor-at-Large of Intelligent Investor and also finance presenter and columnist for the ABC.
And I'm Stephen Mayne, contributor at Intelligent Investor, founder of Crikey and shareholder advocate.
And we're
the Money Café in the cafe, Alan. And I've panic bought petrol yesterday for my 7-seater, 15-year-old gas-guzzling Holden. And I'm nervous about how much petrol I've used up coming to see you today.
Oh, well.
I mean, Are you scared about this war, Alan? I mean, I think oil prices surging.
Well, they surged immediately and then more or less stayed there. I mean, they haven't continued to surge yet. I note that America is now offering insurance and protection for ships going through the Straits of Hormuz. So presumably that'll work. I don't know. I mean, the problem was insurance for ships getting through the Straits.
Well, I think the problem's a bit greater than that, isn't it? The problem is that Iran is firing drones at 9 different countries, which has never happened before, and is causing massive panic on the world's biggest hub and threatening massively important infrastructure, and killed 6 US troops in Bahrain with one stray drone. And this is not Venezuela, is what everyone is saying.
This is not Venezuela.
This is not Venezuela. This is not a quick and surgical strike.
No, they're talking about it going on for a month or more. So yeah, look, I think it's true that oil prices are likely to go up. I mean, a lot of these countries are going to have to reduce or shut down their production, unless Iran is put out of action fairly quickly by America and Israel, which is not impossible.
Well, there's 93 million people. It's the size of Queensland. It's double the size of Ukraine. Remember how the Russians thought they could take out the Ukrainians in 3 days, and everyone's suddenly saying, oh, actually, Ukraine's really quite big. And they've got something called drones, and they can actually fight back, and you can't just do this overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, aren't you... I'm sounding more nervous than you are, Alan, but aren't you in a bit of shock about the scale of the Iranian fight back and the impact they're having?
No, I'm not surprised.
Bombing Dubai? Videos out there of drones crashing into high-rise buildings in Dubai?
Well, because it's not that. Look, yeah, it's terrible, but I suppose I'm not that surprised because it is to some extent a battle not just between America and Israel and Iran. It's between Persians and Arabs as well. I mean, the Persians and Arabs have always been at it. I mean, there was the Iraq-Iran war, which was an appalling conflict, and. That's the way Iran's certainly approaching it.
But how are you feeling about a war of choice run by Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth?
Terrified, really. It's terrible. It's unbelievable.
It is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I mean, Wall Street was down 1,000 points at the start of trade overnight. We're talking early before it's finished. But so this is the time after 4 days, because what's been happening is, even with AI and software, it's always been a rotation. You can always go, oh, well, software's crashing. We can go into hard assets or something. Now there's starting to be, Blackstone has fallen 8% overnight. They're the world's biggest private credit firm, and they're having a run of redemptions. And people are talking about who's exposed in Dubai, travel stocks. So there's this whole sort of contagion worry as well, which this is the black swan event.
And that's right. And one of the contagions is air travel.
Qantas shareholders are down $2 billion, 15% in 10 days. So yeah, Disney stock's getting wiped out because they've got big buildings and resorts and stuff in the Middle East.
Yes,
but you're looking very zen, boss.
Because it's early in the morning.
It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
It's probably worth remembering that a lot of this involves America reaping what it sowed because of the coup in 1953 when the CIA removed the democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't a full democracy. I mean, in those days, Iran was a constitutional monarchy, but the Shah of Iran at that point was relatively weak. He was only 22, or he was in his 20s, and not really running things. Since the Shah took over from his father in 1941, there had been a pretty solid democracy in Iran. You know, they were elected, and then Mossadegh was chosen by the Parliament to be Prime Minister in 1951, and he nationalised the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which became BP, and that was the reason for
the colonialists weren't too happy about that.
They were not,
and they went with literally a CIA orchestrated coup.
Exactly.
Literally, I mean, it was the stuff of left wing. You hear that stuff of left wing conspiracies.
Yeah, well,
these days, but that literally was.
It literally was. But what they didn't do is establish a full democracy. You know, what they could have done was remove him and then establish a democracy, or even not remove him.
They went the royal family model.
And they went the royal family model, and then, of course, the Shah turned into a dictator.
Yeah.
In 1975, he cancelled elections, turned the place into an absolute full tyranny, and 4 years later he was gone. And so, and now they're getting what they sowed.
Yeah, and then you had a Islamic revolution, the clerical military dictatorship for 37 years, and then the Americans and Netanyahu thought they could just decapitate the Ayatollah and Maduro style in Venezuela. They just cop it, but they were distributed orders to bomb everyone in sight, send drones, and then drones are hard to. How do you stop tens of thousands of drones in a massive country the size of Queensland with 93 million people, where the drones are all hidden all over the country? I mean, they didn't plan for this drone counter-offensive. They didn't think they would dare to do it. They thought it would just be like the 12-day war with Israel, where they'd fire a whole bunch of things at Israel and they'd shoot them all out of the sky, and then everyone will say, the Iranians didn't lay a glove on us.
Yeah.
But they're certainly laying a glove on all their friends and allies. And there's 115,000 Australians stuck in the Middle East.
Yeah.
In the largest ever DFAT consular effort in Australian history. I'm sounding scared.
You are, Stephen. You're sounding scared.
But we're not a political or a war. We're not the rest is classified. So we probably should stick with the markets, I guess. But it's a big market event. And it's got oil.
It is, and as you say, it could be the black swan. So look, we've got a few AI questions. We'll get onto AI in the questions. We won't talk about that now. That's the other big topic at the moment. The other thing to mention that I wanted to raise is house prices, which came out the other day for February. The national median price up another 0.8%, so it's 9.6% up for the 12 months. But it's interesting that the Australian housing market has kind of devolved into two markets. One, Melbourne and Sydney are flat, zero change in February. Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth roaring ahead. Unbelievable. I mean, and the thing is, there is an element of catch-up in that Melbourne and Sydney were rising much more quickly than those other regional, smaller capital cities were earlier on, but they're doing much. Those capital cities are doing much more than catching up now. I mean, they're
and
rises.
Why is that? I mean, we've got the old, Melbourne's in decline, relatively speaking. The taxes are too high. The government's bad. The CFMEU's running the state, or whatever you want to say. It's an economic performance tax question to a degree. But as you said, a lot of it is catch up. But Melbourne's now cheaper than quite a few other places.
Yeah, that's right. And
are you surprised by this?
Yeah, I am. Well, and I think it's also a fact that Melbourne and Victoria has been more successful building more houses. They've actually done that. So to some extent, it's a testament to the benefits of more supply. So yeah, I mean, as to why, I don't know. People, I suppose, maybe more people want to live in Brisbane than Melbourne. I can't understand that, but there you go. Look, housing is becoming more and more unaffordable. I had on the news last night that we had housing approvals yesterday for January.
Crashed in apartments. What's going on with
25% down in apartments. Overall dwellings down 7.2% in January. And so the total number of approvals in January was 14,500 and something. The target for the housing accord to make $5 billion in 5 years is not $5 million, $1.2 million in 5 years is 20,000 a month. So they're running 6,000 short of that, and the total shortfall since the housing accord began is 77,000 or so.
Yeah, so the pincer movement is showing no signs of changing. House prices keep going up. Supply is not being delivered.
Not yet, and that's right. Affordability is, I mean, the house price, the median national house price to the average wages is 15 times, and it was 4 times. And if you think about what that means, that's kind of a quarter. That's it's almost 4 times what it used to be. So therefore, a house that now costs $1 million would, if the house price to income ratio had stayed the same, that $1 million house would be costing $250,000. I mean, think about what that means. You know,
well, it means a hell of a lot if you're attempting to buy that house with nothing.
Well,
that's the first home. That's the inequality first home buyers question. It doesn't mean as much if you're a part owner of the $12 trillion of housing out of there, which is bubbled up there, and you're buying in the same market that you're selling. So
well, that's true. But you know, just think that quarter, that $250,000 to $1 million difference changes everything.
It does
about Australia, about the economy, about society, about how we live. It's massive. Yeah.
And at one level, we're incredibly rich. But it is a massive inequality question as well. It's just magnifying inequality enormously.
And I think we tend to feel richer than we are. And we're going around, we've got houses that are worth, 4 times what they should be. And we feel rich, but we're not really. Well, what are you going to do with it? You can't actually...
Well, it doesn't generate a return. I mean, you're living in it, you're getting no income off it. It's like a gold investment. You're renting it out, you're getting, 1.5%, 2%. It's not, might as well put money in the bank from a return point of view. So it's just, it's half investment, it's half shelter. Everyone loves Australia. There's massive immigration. There's not enough supply. You need a roof over your head. That's sort of driving it as well, and all the tax advantages of housing.
Yeah, I mean, well, have we got a question on Canada?
We should do that now. Yeah, why? The question was, why is Canada's house prices down 18% when ours keep going up?
Well, it's because they smashed immigration to almost zero, and also interest rates were higher in Canada than they are in Australia. So that combination just brought house prices down. So, as you say, house prices have fallen a lot. And I think people are kind of saying, it is to a large extent to do with immigration. Yes, there's not enough supply, but why is there not enough supply? But because we've got too many people buying houses. So it's a matter of supply and demand. It isn't just about supply. And that's why One Nation is surging in the polls.
Well, that's the other thing that's happened is they've gone from, and it's partly Bondi. For mine, Bondi was the key event which sent One Nation's vote up the way it has. But yeah, you're right. We've got, could the Canada situation happen here? I mean, I think if you look at the rise of One Nation, you'd have to say there could be some sort of a compromise coalition government next time where the agreement is to smash immigration, smash the student numbers. I mean, Trump's done it. He won on immigration and shut the border and smashed immigration. The Canadians did it without, with a progressive government in there the whole way through. They fended off, but partly they fended off the right by smashing immigration because it was becoming a sensitive issue. So could happen here, but then again, everyone who's ever predicted a housing crash in Australia has been wrong, and it's never gone down by 10% ever, and it just goes up and up and up and up. So who's going to be the first to say bubble, immigration crash, housing bubble burst?
I think we kind of shouldn't ignore interest rates either, because I think interest rates probably are the main factor in house prices.
And they went higher in Canada.
Yeah, and
from 0.25 to 5%.
Yeah,
bottom to top post-COVID.
So the chief economist, or assistant governor economic of the Reserve Bank, Sarah Hunter, did a speech in Norway yesterday in which she compared Australia's interest rates with those of the average of advanced economies. I probably won't do it justice here, but listeners ought to go to the Reserve Bank website and just have a look at her speech, because it's very interesting. She kind of she shows that our interest rate peaked at 5.35%. The average of the advanced economies peaked at, I think it was 5.7%. And then she compared unemployment rate and inflation. And our unemployment rate peaked at a lower. I think it was 4.3%, and advanced economies unemployment rates have peaked higher. She didn't talk about house prices. She talked about. I only talked about consumer price inflation and unemployment. And the whole purpose of what the Reserve Bank was doing, they did it knowing what they were doing. They deliberately attempted to keep unemployment down in Australia, and it worked. So she was basically, blowing their bags and saying, aren't we terrific? We kept unemployment in Australia lower than everywhere else in the world as a result. And in fact, Australia's unemployment rate is the lowest among all of the advanced economies because of
greatest
what they
country
did.
in the world, Alan. Greatest country in the world.
But what the Reserve Bank doesn't do is target house prices. It's not in their mandate. They don't think about it. They don't worry about it. And what that resulted in house prices really rising a lot because Australian interest rates didn't go up very much.
Yeah. So what you're saying is stop crowing about our low unemployment rate. You've on the flip side allowed a housing bubble to get out of control.
Yeah. But not only do they not care about...
Do you think they made a mistake, that they should have risen more, allowed higher unemployment and not allowed the bubble in housing to grow up higher?
That's a hard thing to say.
That's a hard question, boss, isn't it?
I know.
You can't... no one can say, I wish more people were unemployed.
I know.
Politicians, even Alan Kohler, can't say
that difference between, whatever it was, 5.7% unemployment in the rest of the world and 4.3% here is real people.
Yeah. That's right.
Going through terrible times. So how do you say that?
And in Australia, it's an electric fence because we've got the world's most indebted households. But one of the reasons we've got the world's most indebted households from a mortgage point of view is because we've also got the world's biggest pile of super. So everyone can borrow a whole lot more because there's $4 trillion of super sitting there, which they look at their balance sheet and say, well, of course I can borrow 800,000 because I've got 600,000 in super. And, of course, the banks make a pile on that because they clip the ticket every which way on this giant merry-go-round of enormous household debt offset by $4 trillion of compulsorily acquired super. Thank you, Paul Keating.
Yeah.
Now, before we do questions, Alan, I should mention the last day laggards. I've been banging on about this for 20 years. So on the last day of the reporting season, twice a year, so it's the last day in February and August, you get this deluge of dodgy little companies who are disorganised, as in they haven't got their audited accounts together in time because you've got 2 months from year end, or they're taking out the trash cynically, not wanting people to notice because they figure that if 300 other companies are reporting a $3 million loss at the same time, no one will report it. It won't be on the front page of the paper. We get away with it again.
Well, it's true, isn't it?
True.
I mean, it is true.
But I'm claiming a little bit of a win because I've been naming and shaming these people for 20 years. Twice a year I have to spend 10 hours tracking this, and I'm sick of it. So I ran out of puff. I only tracked the ones after 2:30 on Friday, 2:30 p.m. But the number I did get was that there were only 71 losses that were reported after 4 p.m. So normally on the last day, and over the years there's been 120, 130. It's usually always over 100 who wait. So I'm claiming, one, the naming and shaming is working. A few companies are saying it's embarrassing to be in the last day laggards. But two, and it's also a bit scarier, is that it's also the ASX is thinning out. So since January 2023, we've lost 248 public companies, or 10.7%. And we're down to only 2,046 public companies anymore, which is the lowest since before the GFC. So one of the reasons there's less last day laggards is there's just less dodgy small companies overall. And that just goes to the global trend of away from public markets, that there's more in ETFs and private credit and private equity and alternative assets. And so I probably should be sad that there's not, it peaked at almost 400. And now it's on the last day and the following Monday before you get suspended. Because what happens is the ASX says at 10 to 10 the next day, on Monday, the ASX publishes mass suspensions. So your stock gets suspended.
All right.
And so you used to have 40 or 50 companies which would come out before 10 to 10 to avoid the suspension.
All right.
And there were only 8 this time.
But isn't it possible that fewer companies are making losses?
No, look, there's still plenty of losses. Like, Star Entertainment was the last one on Friday night at 8:25 p.m. The casino company.
They were last.
They were last. Another $109 million loss. So they've now got $4.4 billion of accumulated losses. But the one I liked...
What about the one, just before you move, what about the old saying that the house always wins?
Casino house, I mean, they've just been absolutely destroyed. Literally, the investors have lost $4.5 billion in that thing.
Oh.
It's probably... It's in the top 3 or 4 disasters of all time. So the house has certainly not won there. But the one that I found the funniest was there's a company called Can Group, which is one of those medicinal marijuana companies. You know how all these billions has been lost in medicinal marijuana. And they come out on the last day and they said, we made a $26 million profit. And then you read the fine print and it's National Australia Bank has walked away from their $70 million debt for $15 million. So we've got a $55.6 million profit from debt forgiveness.
Wow.
So they've come out with a last day profit.
Yeah,
and
right.
Poor old NAB has literally lost $55.6 million bankrolling this unprofitable medicinal marijuana company.
So
so
the chief accountant was consuming the product.
Well, it's enough to send a bank at a pot, isn't it? I mean, the things you see, looking in the rubble on the last day, Alan.
Okay, before we go to questions, there's a quick word from our sponsor.
Think investing's out of reach? Think again. With InvestSmart's Fund Later, you can own a $10,000 ETF portfolio with just $4,000 up front. Fund Later covers the rest, lending you $6,000, which you repay over 20 monthly installments, including a facility fee. There's no interest, no margin calls, and no waiting. Whether you're new to investing or a parent looking to give your kids a brighter future, it's a smart way to fast-track your investment journey. Choose from 4 expertly managed portfolios and get $10,000 working for you from day one. Learn more at fundlater.com.au. Terms and conditions apply.
Now, DQ says, is that Don Quixote? I don't know. Anyway, DQ says, first off, a request. Can we limit AI talk to every second week on the podcast? As you say yourself, we've no idea of its impact, so let's talk about something more interesting. Well, unfortunately, DQ, we got deluged with AI questions. So look, we might do 1 or 2 at the top, and that'll be it. So Dave says, we have James whinging that our productivity growth is terrible, and then Alan saying productivity growth is going to explode so much that we have 30% unemployment by 2030. Can you guys put your heads together and come to a reasonable position? And Emily says, last episode you mentioned the optimist case for AI being productivity increases that lead to abundance. It compensates for job losses. Surely for that to occur, governments need to be much more interventionist in wealth distribution. Given the political influence of tech oligarchs, both through direct contributions to politicians and by controlling the information delivery, the idea of an abundance-fueled welfare state seems like a pipe dream. Thoughts?
The AI is not yet showing up in productivity statistics. That is true. I think it probably will at some point. But, there's much more to productivity. And the reason productivity is down is because of a lot of areas, a lot of parts of the economy that will take a while to be taken over by AI, or at least have them come into it. And I think, in fact, a lot of it would need robots because it's in healthcare and aged care and a lot of those kind of care industries, which is where the low productivity. It's not so much that they are less productive. Those industries are less productive than they were. It's just that more of the economy is shifting into those industries, which are inherently less productive.
But in terms of the jobs desert, since we last met, Alan, you've had WiseTech announcing 2,000 job losses, and you've had, I always forget their name, Jack Dorsey's outfit, Square, Block, XYZ
Block.
is the code.
Block.
Anyway, they bought Afterpay for a ridiculous amount of money, but they announced a 40% job cut, and the stock price went up 20%. And so the 1,300 Afterpay workers in Australia, I mean, they've all just been sacked after a big love-in at Lawn on the Great Ocean Road. They all got their notices. So they're 2 very prominent sort of tech companies that have announced literally thousands of job losses because of AI. And in both cases, or particularly the Square, Block, Dorsey XYZ case, Afterpay, stock was up 20% on the announcement. So it's a bit like the old ANZ guy. That ANZ tough guy comes in, Nuno, and you just have to say you're going to sack thousands of people, and the market loves you, and up goes the share price. So the temptation now is for everyone to say, we're sacking 30% of our workforce just to get your share price up 20%. But whether you actually do it, whether it kills your business, what happens to all the people thrown on the jobs heap, I mean, It's the day after the announcement where things get tough, isn't it? When you do that massive AI restructure, which is seemingly going to come.
Look, and on the question of government intervention, look, it's true. The question is, what will permanent unemployment get to? I mean, at the moment, permanent unemployment is around about 4 to 4.5% because that's what the central banks target as being full employment, right? So they're not going to allow unemployment, if they can help it, to go below 4%. So that's the level. So the question is, will it be 10% of unemployment?
Tops. Absolute tops.
That's your view, is it?
Yep. You think it's going to go higher?
I do.
10.
Yeah. I do. And so I think that 10% probably can be handled with the existing welfare system. The problem with it is that if it's 10% permanent unemployment, the job seeker is neither enough in dollar terms, nor are the rules around it really adequate for the AI age, because you have to keep looking for a job and all this stuff. So probably the government needs to get its head around the idea that there is going to be a number of people who just can't get a job anymore because they're just out of the game. But I actually think it'll go to more than 10%. I mean, I can't see how it won't.
And as for James whinging about productivity, I mean, you can have both things happening at the same time. I mean, just look at Victoria. We've got the Northeast Link. $26 billion. It was meant to be $10 billion, and it's a CFMEU racket with bikie gangs all over it. I mean, that's a productivity question. That's a construction productivity. So productivity is a lot broader than just white-collar jobs. It's the entire economy. Yeah, and overall, Australia is a high-cost, inefficient, not very productive economy at the moment, living beyond its means.
Yeah.
And how sustainable is that? Now, Alex says, there's an idea that buying a house to live in is an asset, but it's not. Buying a house is in fact a lump sum payment for all of your future housing costs. Renting is like having a short position in housing. You want prices to fall. And buying a house is simply closing that short position. As an owner-occupier, you shouldn't care whether your house value increases or decreases. It's the same house. But voters hate seeing the value of their property falling and elect governments accordingly. How do we change this? Have you ever thought about it like that? That renting is like shorting?
I hadn't actually, but it's
an interesting point, isn't it?
It's an interesting point. I mean, most people have a mortgage, so to some extent you're renting it off the bank. Very few people are buying their house without a mortgage. But yeah, look, I think that's a good point. I think it's true that I mean, investing generally, the whole idea of investing is you're buying something you don't need in order to make more money. A house is something you need. It's not as if you can avoid having a roof over your head. You can either rent or buy. So the decision about housing is the classic business decision: rent or buy. Which businesses all do, particularly in relation to their premises. Do you lease a premise or do you buy a shop? And it's the same with housing, because you have to have a house. So Greg says, writing to you from India with an observation on gold. As I travel around, it is amazing that every town, big and small, is plastered with billboards for gold loans. I didn't know that. All of the big banks have moved into this as a lucrative means of leveraging people into additional gold purchases using an LVR, loan-to-value ratio of 85% on the gold offered as security. This works great in a rising market, but will act as a huge decelerator on the price of gold should a significant downturn occur and banks call in the loans. China is in a very similar position, with the recent 10% fall attributed to Chinese leveraged selling. It seems that with these two major gold purchasing countries leveraged to what could be seen as a speculative bubble, there will potentially be a lot of pain ahead. Are you aware of any published data on the prices Australian miners have locked in for forward supply? Are you, Stephen? Because I'm not.
Look, so many miners lost money hedging and had unprofitable hedge books. I mean, quite often you'd have capital raising plays where they say, we're raising $300 million to buy out and close off our hedge book. So as a rule, Australian miners, having been burnt from bad hedging previously, the investors prefer them to be unhedged. But I would say, with gold prices so ridiculously high, if I was a gold miner, I would probably be forward selling at the moment. Just like BHP's just done a massive forward sell of one of their silver mines, where they've effectively sold it forward for like $7 billion. So, yeah, because, what about gold at the moment with the war? Normally gold takes off in a crisis, but effectively the election of Trump has been a global crisis from an investment point of view, and gold has gone to record highs, and now we've got a war on top of that. Yeah. So it's not as if it's going to suddenly go up, it's going to leg up another 20%.
Look, it always kind of puzzles me a bit that gold and silver, gold particularly, but silver as well, are seen as safe haven investments when in fact they're speculative. All the price is being set by speculators who are leveraged, mainly in China and India. So really, when you're buying gold, and even if you're buying a bar of gold from ABC Bullion or the Perth Mint, it's being priced against the spot and futures markets, and so the whole thing is a speculative bubble for sure.
And it could tumble, just like
of course
Australian housing could tumble as Canadian housing did tumble.
Well, if the banks in India start calling in their loans, all those people are going to have to sell fast. Yeah.
Now, Anna...
That's a long question.
I won't read it all, but I just love the way she frames it at the start. Anna says, "G'day, fellas. I know you said you wanted more female listener questions, so here goes." And then I won't read the whole thing, but Anna makes a really good case about picking up from the discussion we had last week about the unmeasured care economy.
Yes.
That with surging house prices and everyone having to work now, that there's no one to do tuck shop duty, there's no one to do those traditional volunteering jobs. Are we going to have to move to a position where many of those traditional volunteer jobs in the economy become paid? And I think she's absolutely right. That because, as she says, when people in their 40s and 50s now get to retirement age, they're going to still be working because they'll still be paying off their debt from buying their house, etc., if they haven't had a bank and mum and dad lottery win.
Yeah. It's interesting. Last week I attended the Senate inquiry into the capital gains tax discount and, did a burst on that and said that, yes, it'd be a good idea to cut the capital gains tax discount to help make housing more affordable. And then I got an email from somebody who I won't name, but he said that my comments were shallow, glib, and dangerous, right? And he included his phone number, so I rang him up and said,
"Hello, mate, Alan Kohler here. How dare you?"
I said, "No." I rang him up and said that was harsh.
Well, he knew that. Then what did you say?
I said, "Okay."
And you're wrong, son. You were wrong.
So I said, "No." I said, "I'll bite. Why am I shallow, glib, and dangerous?"
Did he fold?
Well, he apologised, but then he said, no, the reason is because you're going on about how the capital gains tax discount in 1999 caused house prices to start rising more quickly. He says, my position, and this guy, I actually looked him up. He runs.
You LinkedIn him, did you? You stalked him online, then you did the hustled phone call down the line.
He's a financial advisor, right? So he's a wealth manager. So he's got a bit of substance.
So you worked out he wasn't a nutter.
He wasn't
someone
a nutter.
You could call.
He's someone worth talking to. So anyway, he said no. The reason he says his position is that the reason house prices started rising more quickly than incomes. The year 2000 is because of the big increase in double income families in the 90s. Because
more capacity to borrow and buy.
So his point is that the thing of both partners working, and in particular women going into the workforce, predated the rise in house prices. It wasn't. His point is that it wasn't a necessity caused by the rise in house prices. It actually was a factor in causing house prices to go up.
That's a chicken and egg question, isn't it? Well, I think it's a bit simplistic if he's saying not one or the other. It's both.
No, but you could, and I haven't actually done this, but he says he's done the work, and you can actually show that the increase in double income families predated the rise in house prices. That's what he says.
Yeah, okay. Now, just responding to Anna's thing, I want to say she's absolutely right. And the world is going to have to change. Councils in Victoria pay now for school crossing supervisors. They used to be volunteers organised by the schools, and now council hires them. It's a classic cost shift argument. Many tennis clubs now effectively has the tennis coach as the full-time CEO of the club. I remember going to a bowls club 50th birthday, and they said, our female bowls numbers have halved in 30 years because all the grandmas are so busy looking after the kids because both parents are working. So there are fundamental changes, and I agree that government should step up and pay a lot of these volunteers for the people who've been displaced from AI.
Well,
that's the solution.
As if the government's not going to come in and resolve the bowling crisis.
No, but the canteen manager at the footy club should be paid. There should be a whole bunch of people doing those voluntary jobs.
What, by the government?
No, by the system.
Oh, by the system.
Like the school crossing supervisors.
But the system hasn't, in those cases, haven't got any money.
But there's no volunteers to do the job. You have to buy it in eventually.
Yeah,
That's
right.
why you're buying catering for the president's lunch at the footy club these days, because you haven't got 6 volunteers to sit at the kitchen serving. Anyway, sorry about that. Now, we've got 3 capital gains tax questions, so we're going to play on with a couple of them. Lincoln says first, regarding the capital gains tax discount either being reduced or removed, would there be any benefit to having it, say, a 5% discount added every year to a maximum of 50%? So if you hold a property for 10 years, you can still get a 50% discount, but if you decide to sell after 2 years, it's only 10%. And Dave's suggestion is similar, but the other way. He says that if you're going to phase out the discount, why don't you phase it out over 5 years? So the discount becomes 50%, 40%, 30%, 20% over 5 years, etc. And Dave's prediction is watch the market flood with supply of existing houses with big capital gains if you adapted that. So
and you should also mention Shane's question.
And Shane says most housing affordability policies seem to focus on the front end of the market, grants, guarantees, demand side incentives, which arguably just inflate prices. What are your thoughts on a back end incentive, such as offering a capital gains discount to sellers only when a property is sold to a first home buyer? So this is all system reform design.
Yeah, so taking it one at a time. The whole point of the capital gains tax discount was that it replaced the inflation adjustment, the CPI adjustment, and made it simpler. And my argument has been and remains that it's more than it needs to be to replace inflation. It's too high. It's not much too high, but it is a bit too high, and they could justifiably reduce it to 33%. The 5% discount per annum, that would be too much again because the inflation rate is 3.2% or something at the moment. The RBA wants it to be 2.5%. So 5% each year would be arguably double what it needs to be, which is 2.5% for inflation. The thing about only getting the discount if you sell to first home buyers, well, that's
too complicated.
Well, also, I mean, what is it? Firstly, that's just another way of having a first home buyer grant. Yeah. Because presumably the idea is that the seller sells it more cheaply to the first home buyer than they would sell it to somebody else. Yeah. And that's basically being subsidised by the government, which is a first home buyer grant. And secondly, how do you go about that? I mean, you can't have an auction. What do you advertise? First home buyers.
You come in with a badge saying verified, qualified first home buyer.
Exactly.
And of course, that's someone with 5 kids organising one house for each of their kids because they haven't ticked the first home. That would be gamed.
Yeah.
System design is important with these things. You've got to keep it simple.
That's right.
So what change will they do? I think they're just going to go bang, and they're going to go cut from 50% to 25%. Just go bang, and just one simple change.
I've seen 33% mentioned, and I suspect that's because somebody's
they're modelling it.
Somebody in the Treasurer's office is talking, hinting that it's 33%. So I wouldn't mind betting it's 33%.
And what about creating an incentive to sell? That's an interesting question. If you're worried about house prices, so you create this thing where it is more expensive to hold in 5 years' time. I mean, I don't mind that as a model because it would free up supplies, just like the punitive land tax regime in Victoria has flooded the market with people selling their holiday houses, their investment properties.
Well, the main disincentive for downsizers, retirees, and that to sell is the stamp duty.
Stamp duty, yeah. But they can't work with the states. You see, that's the thing. They need to work with the states on a whole of package, whole of industry reform. Now, Merrin has written in basically saying, listen, you city snobs, stop talking about your EV cars while you're sipping your lattes. Us people in the bush on farms, we can't we need range, and so think about us. And I guess with Merrim, we're just saying, look, no one's forcing you to drive an EV. And then Phil's written in to say that Alan commented about his ownership of an EV and the difficulty of determining the running costs. And Phil's story is that he and his wife both own an EV, and they charge it on their solar overnight, and it costs them next to nothing. But during the day using solar. And one time when he charged it overnight, he was shocked that it cost him $6 for 100k of range. So it was more expensive charging it, still relatively cheap. But overall, Phil's comment is that you're absolutely saving a mozza, Alan, even if you're charging it overnight compared to filling up the car for $100.
How does $6 for 100 k's of range compare with petrol? Do you know?
Well, that's slightly more expensive than I thought, and that's Phil's point. He's saying he was surprised it was that much, but it's next to nothing using it when solar is cheap during the day.
Yeah.
So,
that's right. No.
But we've got a question later on about whether we should have a road user charge like New Zealand, because their charge for EVs is $76 per 1,000 kilometres. I was wondering if that's why Jacinda Ardern is moving to Australia, to get away from the road user charge in New Zealand.
No, she's moving to Australia because it's nice here.
Yes, that's right. It's a bit embarrassing, isn't it, to lose your Prime Minister to across the ditch. But do you support the question was, do we support a road user charge?
By the way, the other reason...
Because people like you, Alan, are not paying your fair share on road maintenance, and you should be like the Kiwis, $76 for every 1,000 kilometres you drive, Mr. EV guy. I say charge Kohler and his EV cohorts more for the road damage they're causing.
Yeah. I think governments will have to have a road user charge, of course. I mean, because at some point there'll be no revenue to keep up the roads. And the other reason for moving from New Zealand to Australia is because you like Shiraz, and you're sick of Pinot Noir. I mean,
it's
anyway.
like Dan Andrews. He can't live in Melbourne anymore. The poor guy. He can't show his face after all the COVID lockdowns.
What's that got to do with
politicians leaving their jurisdiction?
Oh, I see.
Because is Dan going to finish up in Dubai? Do you think?
Well, not at the moment.
Not at the moment. No.
No, but he'll end up in Queensland.
Well,
he'll go to Queensland
in a gated community, safe away from angry Victorians. Now, James wants to know. James has got an interesting question. What can high-income salaried workers do to minimise tax paid? Tax is the largest expense I have. He's paying over 100k a year in tax, plus the ATO demands I pay them quarterly. It seems that if you own a small business, you can pump all sorts of expenses through the business and can claim deductions for things that a salaried worker can't. So James is in the top 5% of income earners, yet he's living in Sydney, can't afford a house in a nice part of Sydney, and will have to go and live on the fringes, even though he's paying 100k a year in tax. The government treats people like me, like an inexhaustible source of revenue, and I get little return. Should I just go and live in Singapore or Hong Kong? I reckon anyone who's paying more than $100,000 a year in tax, like James, should get a badge that says they can walk around the street saying, I pay for a federal police officer, or I pay for 1.5 nurses. Because you're right, they don't get the credit. People who pay enormous amounts of income tax do not get the credit. Everyone just thinks you're on 300,000, you're rich. Well, actually, the government's taking 100,000 plus of that, and the government's getting rich, and you're working hard. So I feel sorry for James because we've got.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking my own book here, Alan. I'm nothing like that. But do you agree that it's a bit rough and that the personal income tax rates are too high? And we don't want James going to Singapore or Hong Kong. We want to keep him here, but we shouldn't tax him as much.
Yeah. So one of the things I was on about at the Senate committee inquiry into capital gains tax is that the problem is that in Australia we tax income too much and capital not enough. And the thing is that rich people have capital, less rich people rely on income, and we've got the top marginal tax rate is probably okay at 45% plus the Medicare levy, but it kicks in far too early. So, yes, I mean, we need to tax capital more. The reason capital taxes have come down, not just the capital gains tax discount, but lower company income tax rates and so on, is because capital has become so mobile. And we're competing against places like Singapore and other places. So we have to tax immobile assets, such as minerals and housing, which can't be moved.
And we should also
to the Cook Islands.
If you're really honest, if you want to tax capital, you'd be taxing the family home.
That's right.
All $12 trillion of it in residential, a lot of that which is tax sheltered within the family home structure. And then you have death duties as well. Now, we'll do one more question because Jessica, I love this. We want more female questions, so we love Jessica. We need more female questions. So Jessica says, I deeply appreciate your intelligent commentary to explain how our society, economy and the world work, and especially your clear identification of what changes could improve growing inequality. My question is, besides being Treasurer of Australia or a politician, where in our economy could I work and have the greatest impact to improve inequality in Australia, if anywhere? So where is what noble job could Jessica do to fight inequality? Maybe work at the ABC, because they always seem to be talking about inequality.
Yes, I know. Every day I'm fighting inequality at the ABC.
Housing, is it too expensive?
That's
It
right.
needs to be more affordable for first home buyers, etc.
Yeah.
But work for a charity? Do you think work for councils are good at
Work
helping
for the
people?
salvos. Well, I really like those companies that collect leftover food at restaurants and distribute it among poor people and homeless people. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. But you don't want to be working at a pokies venue taking free coffees to addicted gamblers, or you don't want to be the concierge at the Melbourne Club or some five-star hotel. So it's an interesting question. Where can you work where you can sleep at night and you can help people? And I think that the charity sector, working at Centrelink, guiding people into which programs you should be on, etc. There's a lot of noble places to work, but unfortunately you don't get paid very well when you work there.
No, that's right. You get paid more delivering coffee to addicted gamblers.
At poker machine venues.
Except if you work at Star Entertainment.
Well, that's right. They've
Brisbane.
lost $4.5 billion now. That's right. So, yes. But Jessica, great question. We got through quite a few there, Alan. But
We did.
I reckon we're done.
whizzed through. There's a couple we didn't get to. But thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode of the Money Café. I'll be back next week with James Thompson. Send in your question to the Money Café at intelligentinvestor.com.au and we'll answer it then. We'll certainly try to. Keep your questions short, sweet and to the point. Until then, I'm Alan Kohler, Editor-at-Large of Intelligent Investor and Finance Presenter and Columnist for the ABC.
And I'm Stephen Mayne, and look forward to seeing you in a fortnight.